They weren't shooting back. There was no incoming fire from the village. There was no ambush. There were only screams. Women running with babies in their arms. Elderly men kneeling and begging. Children trying to hide behind the bodies of their own parents. And armed soldiers firing. On the morning of March 16, 1968, in a small rural community called My Lai, in Quang Ngai Province, something happened that would forever stain the history of the Vietnam War. But on that same day, one man decided that this was not war. It was murder, and he landed in the middle of hell. The mission. Hugh Thompson Jr. was 24 years old, the son of a simple family from the southern United States, an Army helicopter pilot. He was not a war celebrity, not a famous decorated hero, just a young officer following orders. That morning, he was flying an OH-23 Raven reconnaissance helicopter. His job was to scout the area, identify enemy movement, and mark potential targets. The operation had a technical name, Search and Destroy. Military intelligence believed My Lai was a Viet Cong stronghold. The plan was simple: move in, eliminate threats, move out. But as Thompson flew over the village, he began to notice something strange. He saw no active firefight, no enemy soldiers returning fire, no defensive positions. He saw bodies. Something is very wrong. From above, Thompson watched people running in panic. Some were shot in the back. Others lay motionless on the ground. He radioed for clarification, asked if there was active combat. The response was vague. As he circled again, he saw a group of civilians hiding in a makeshift shelter. American soldiers approached. Minutes later, gunfire. When he returned, the shelter was silent. Everyone inside was dead. There were no weapons nearby. There had been no resistance. Slowly, the reality formed in Thompson's mind. This was not a battle. It was a massacre. The ditch. Then he saw something he would never forget. A drainage ditch. Inside it, dozens of bodies piled together. Men, women, children. Some were still moving. He landed near the site and saw soldiers firing directly at unarmed civilians. A wounded child tried to crawl out from the pile of corpses. A soldier aimed his rifle. Thompson shouted over the intercom. This had to stop. The decision. At that moment, Hugh Thompson did something unthinkable. He landed his helicopter between American soldiers and a group of civilians trying to hide. He stepped out and confronted an officer on the ground. He demanded to know what was happening. The response was cold. We're following orders. Thompson returned to his helicopter. His two crew members, Lawrence Colburn and Glenn Andreatta, sensed that something serious was unfolding. Then came the most shocking order of that day. If the soldiers fired on the civilians, they were to open fire on the Americans. A United States Army pilot was prepared to aim his weapons at fellow American troops to protect Vietnamese civilians. In that instant, he did not choose a political side. He chose humanity. The rescue. Thompson landed again and ordered civilians out of hiding. He called in other helicopters to evacuate survivors. Under extreme tension, with armed soldiers nearby, he managed to extract women and children from the area. In one of the most powerful moments of that day, Glenn Andreatta found a child still alive beneath a pile of bodies in the ditch. They lifted the child into the helicopter. It was a race against time and against their own comrades. By the end of that morning, an estimated 347 to 500 civilians had been killed at My Lai, but dozens survived because of Hugh Thompson and his crew. Silence and hostility. When Thompson officially reported what he had witnessed, he expected immediate investigation. Instead, he met resistance. At first, his reports were minimized. Some officers attempted to cover up the events. When the massacre became public months later, the country was already deeply divided. The war was increasingly unpopular. The scandal made it worse. And Thompson, many saw him as a traitor. He received threats. He was called an enemy. He was accused of exaggerating. In America in the late 1960s, questioning soldiers' actions during wartime was not widely seen as heroism. It was seen as betrayal. Years later, the My Lai massacre became one of the darkest chapters of the Vietnam War. Investigations followed. Only one officer, William Calley, was convicted, and he ultimately served house arrest. But Hugh Thompson's story took decades to receive recognition. Only in 1998, 30 years later, he and his crew were awarded the Soldier's Medal, one of the highest honors for heroism outside direct combat with the enemy. Years later, during a visit to My Lai, Thompson met survivors. He wept. They embraced him. An American soldier once hated at home was thanked in the very country where few expected gratitude. The weight of conscience. Hugh Thompson never considered himself a hero. He said he simply did what was right. But what is right in the middle of war? In an environment ruled by fear, hatred, and dehumanization? My Lai revealed the worst war can produce. But it also revealed something rare. Even in the middle of barbarity, someone can choose not to participate. Someone can say no. Someone can land in hell and try to put out the flames. Epilogue. Hugh Thompson Jr. died in 2006. Today, he is remembered not for how many enemies he defeated, but for how many lives he saved. In the Vietnam War, there were bloody battles, failed strategies, and controversial political decisions. But on March 16, 1968, in My Lai, history recorded something different. A 24-year-old pilot proved that courage is not only advancing under enemy fire. Sometimes, it is turning the weapon in the opposite direction and protecting those who cannot defend themselves.